Hello. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to talk about this topic, which is going to be the theme for the entire month of November, which is burnout. And so today I'm going to be giving just a high-level overview of what burnout is and the connection between emotional exhaustion. So we'll just begin. So first, I would like to just kind of guide you through a little self-assessment for you to reflect on yourself and just see if you can identify any of these symptoms, as burnout is really, really common in our society with everything that's going on and just kind of the way that we tend to live. So do you feel overwhelmed by the stressors in your everyday life? Do you have strong emotional reactions to the activities in your day-to-day life that feel somewhat overwhelming? Or have you been in a situation where there's an ongoing, there's a little question that came in. Monica wanted to ask you how to deal with grief in terms of Ayurveda. Okay. That's a good one. I think I might have to table that one for now, but I will definitely circle back to it. And I think that you'll actually get a lot from this talk that we're going to do today, because we're going to dive into emotional health and wellness also, and just how to process emotions in a healthy way so that they don't manifest as imbalance in the body. So how do you tend to respond or react to your own emotions? How do you take care of yourself emotionally when you feel something that's uncomfortable? Obviously, it's easy to feel something that's joyful and pleasant, but it's more difficult and challenging for us to allow ourselves to experience and feel feelings that are not pleasant, like grief or anger or frustration. And for most of us, when we start to feel those feelings, our initial response or reaction is try to escape from feeling those feelings themselves. So my first question to you, as far as a self-inquiry process goes, is how do you interface with an unpleasant emotion, with a feeling that doesn't make you feel very good? For most people, the reaction is to try to suppress it somehow. So to try to push it out of your scope. So that would be maybe you try to sidetrack yourself and engage in some other type of activity. Maybe you try to numb out, drinking, eating, going out with friends, or you could just totally deny the emotion or the feeling, or you might try to avoid it. You may internalize it, not share it with anybody, or you could do the opposite, which is to talk about it with anybody who would listen, but you're not really moving forward away from the emotion. You're kind of just reliving it. So those are key things to know when you're also looking at how burnout may be affecting you or impacting you in your life. So burnout is a term that's being used more and more. Historically, it was used to apply what could happen to a person in a work environment, who was in a work environment for a long period of time and then essentially burnt out, became totally exhausted of the work environment. But that term burnout is now starting to be used more broadly to apply a state that can occur in any stressful type of relationship. So that could be a personal relationship, a marriage, a friendship, etc. Burnout is not just a mental phenomenon, it's also a physical one. So when you are burning out, you are actually literally burning out. So inflammation in the body starts to rise. There's a whole cascade of inflammatory processes that start to occur in the body, and that can be very damaging. It can impact your digestion. So many times people, when they're underneath stress for a long period of time, they'll start to develop digestive issues, get headaches, feel achy joints in the body, sleep disturbances, insomnia, and then also just feeling exhausted and feeling tired. So there's physical manifestations of burnout that start to happen eventually. But the first phase of burnout, which is what I want to talk about today, is the emotional exhaustion that starts to occur. So emotions are the first thing to start to be impacted by the cycle of burnout. But because most of us in our society aren't well equipped to understand how to deal with unpleasant emotions, most of us tend to not deal with unpleasant emotions in a healthy way. And this isn't, a criticism of any person individually, because it's actually just a reflection of how we tend to discuss and talk and handle our feelings collectively as a society. So I would just ask you, when you were a kid, when you were a child, did any adult ever, sit you down and talk to you about your feelings? And not just, how you feel, but, how to handle your feelings, how to communicate effectively with somebody else about your emotions or your feelings. Did anyone ever speak to you about what emotional health is, or signs of emotional abuse, or what it means to be in a healthy relationship with somebody on an emotional level, and what it means to be in an unhealthy relationship emotionally with somebody? Probably not, right? If you're like the majority of people, probably not. So instead, you were probably given message, if not by your parents, but then definitely by society, that your feelings and your emotions are in some way inferior to your logic, not to trust your feelings, that they're volatile, they're mysterious, they're not to be relied on when making decisions. Don't make decisions from an emotional place is something that people get commonly told. Or if you show your emotions, you are weak, so keep them to yourself. But if you show your emotions too much, then you're crazy. So there's all these messages that we receive from society and from our parents who raise us to essentially suppress our emotions. But the major problem with that is that we are actually total emotional beings. So a lot of us believe that we're cognitive beings, that we're thinking beings, and we occasionally feel. But actually the opposite is true. We're emotional and feeling beings who on occasion think. All of us make all of our decisions based actually on how we feel, our emotions. Even if if you want something in particular, if you want a luxury car, or you want to go on an adventure, on a vacation, or you want to achieve a certain amount of success, it's not really for the thing itself. It's for how the thing is going to make you feel. So all of our decisions are based on our feelings. So it makes that mixed up message that we get from society and from perhaps our parents to not rely on our feelings very confusing. And it breaks our ability to access the intelligence that is innately a part of our feelings. So our feelings, our emotions are actually a part of our intelligence. But when we constantly suppress our feelings, avoid them, deny them, we break access to their intelligence. But not only do we break access to the intelligence that's in our feelings, we also break access to our intuition, because our intuition actually communicates to us through how we feel. Our intuition is that animal and primal part of ourselves that feels when something is right for us or when something is wrong for us. So there is an occasion when that societal message to not trust your feelings can be correct. And that is when a person has been suppressing, denying, or gone through trauma and it's not been processed yet. Their feeling navigation system is in some ways broken, right? Because then you're not seeing life accurately in many ways. You're seeing life through a veil of your unprocessed emotions. And that's when we can do things like project onto other people the parts of ourselves that we've rejected, or project onto situations that are relatively neutral, our past traumas, or feel safe in situations that should alert us, and feel afraid of situations or people that we should feel safe around. So those are all signs and symptoms that there are unprocessed emotions, unprocessed traumas, suppressed emotions, and that can influence our ability, again, to access the accuracy of our inner innate feeling intelligence system. So back to burnout, that first initial phase of burnout is emotional exhaustion. So even though there are these physical manifestations that happen at the end or the middle and the end phases of burnout, like adrenal fatigue or even autoimmune issues, or just immune system depression. So a person's getting chronic flus, chronically sick all the time, or feeling tired all the time, or many different types of digestive issues. So those are all physical manifestations of burnout. The very, very, very beginning, the first initial phase, is emotional. It's emotional exhaustion. And that's why it's so important for all of us to be attentive and listening to our feelings and process our emotions appropriately, because if you don't, they very much can start to manifest disease symptoms in the body. So I've been working with people pretty closely for the last 15 years on digestive issues. And I can tell you that, probably 99% of the people that I've worked with, the connection between digestion and anxiety or depression is just so tightly linked. Either the person was already predisposed to having anxiety as a child and growing up, or they went through a significant traumatic event and then the digestive issue manifested, or they've been through a lot of stress and then the digestive issue, but it is literally almost 100% of the time. And if you're trying to heal from something, a physical issue of any kind, then you really want to look at how the mind and the emotions are playing a part of it. Because, just in the instance of burnout and the connection that the burnout has, like literally burning your body out and stimulating the inflammatory process in the body, inflammation is the precursor to so many diseases that accelerates the manifestation of disease. So you really need to get a hold on this piece of mind and emotions, being attentive to your feelings and processing your feelings completely, because you can't really see essentially what's going on physically in a person's body when they're so upset and there's a lot of turmoil in the mind, or when they've just totally suppressed their emotions and feelings and they're not even conscious of what they're feeling. So it's definitely not easy work at all. This is difficult work, especially if you've gone your entire life and you're an adult, sort of functioning this way of disconnecting from how you actually feel, or distrusting your feelings, or having the belief that your feelings are inferior to your logic and they can't be trusted. It's difficult to do the work. And I still all the time have moments where I'm peeling back the layers and I'm like, wow, I didn't even realize that I had that feeling beneath the surface. I didn't even realize that I felt that way. So the first initial phase of burnout is emotional exhaustion. And, I want to just say that no feeling and no emotion is bad or wrong. So every feeling is totally okay to feel. And I think that belief that there are bad feelings and good feelings is also part of the problem, because as soon as you label something as a bad feeling, there's automatically going to be shame, and judgment and rejection around having that feeling or that emotion. So taking away the word bad feeling, even if it's a feeling of hatred or anger or rage, whatever the feeling is, there are no bad feelings. So it doesn't mean that you need to act on the feeling. So if you feel, hatred, for example, that doesn't make you a bad person. It's okay. Just get okay with that feeling. But just because you feel that feeling, it doesn't mean you need to act on the feeling. It doesn't mean you need to commit an act of violence, for example. But it's our denial, suppression, shame around having these types of feelings that becomes the impetus or the catalyst for many different types of unconscious behaviors that can get a person into trouble. So to combat burnout, is to first get okay with actually how you're feeling and to stop denying, suppressing, or avoiding the emotion or the feeling itself. So how do you actually do that? It's uncomfortable, right? It's not comfortable to sit with the feeling, but that's really what you need to do. Ideally in the moment that the feeling and the emotion comes up. However, you may be in a situation there where you may need to compartmentalize and put it away. So maybe it's not appropriate to, be in your work environment or around your child and, express this, rage or whatever. You may need to kind of put it aside, and then you go to your home, your area, your home, your private space, and you literally just sit with the feeling. You may notice that you don't want to do that, that's difficult. If it's grief, if it's heartbreak, if it's rejection, it's anger, it's jealousy, it's criticism, it's, whatever, sort of emotional feeling is not pleasant. You have to resist the urge to do things like pick up a phone and call your friend and start talking to them about it. Not that doesn't have a place, but often, even though we may think, oh gosh, I just need somebody to talk about it with. Sometimes what we're actually doing is just reliving the emotion. We're not actually processing the emotion or the feeling. We're reliving it. And there can be a sort of addiction tendency with these emotions and feelings that even though they're unpleasant, we can kind of get hooked on them in a little way. Eckhart Tolle talks about this and identifies it as the pain body. That each of us has this pain body, which is almost like this, energetic form and of our pain. And so the more that you nurture and relive and sit in this pain without processing the pain, the more that it actually feeds this pain body. And if your pain body gets so big, then you can get essentially addicted to being in pain. So there is this also simultaneous allowance where you have to give yourself permission to feel good. To really feel good and to allow and to receive. And there's many different ways that we can block ourselves from being in a receiving state where we actually feel good, to let go, and to be in that lightness of being, of just allowing ourselves to feel good. But before that, you've got to kind of process these emotions that are difficult to sit with, are challenging to sit with. So one way to do that is to, when you feel the emotion itself, is to create a space, if that's in your house or your room, and just literally sit there and be with it. It's actually that simple. It sounds simple in theory, but in practice, it's difficult and it's challenging. And just allow yourself to feel it. And what will start to happen is the emotion and the feeling, it will lessen. It will lessen. And when you get to the end of the feeling, you will develop a new meaning around the feeling itself. A feeling is is a thought. It's attached to a thought. A feeling is attached to a thought. And a feeling that is attached to a thought is stored in the mind as a memory. So, I don't know, you go through a divorce, okay? And you have all these different thoughts about the divorce and all these different feelings about the divorce. And that is what a memory is. That's what creates that memory in your mind. So if you didn't ever, let's say process the feeling around, maybe your spouse had an affair. So there's like a lot of betrayal there. There's a lot of like angst there. And so every time you recall your divorce, you explain it in the same exact way. There was this huge betrayal and, all these things happened to you. Now, let's say you take the time to process those feelings and those emotions. So you create that space in your home and you sit with it and you sit with that betrayal and you allow yourself to feel it fully. No escaping it. No, like I said, getting on the phone, telling a friend about this horrible thing that happened to you. And just allowing yourself to feel that emotion, and you allow yourself to cycle through it, the feeling and the thought will disconnect from each other, and you will then start to create new meaning that is more empowering to you, that is more freeing to you, that is more lightening to you. It's true that there are feelings and their emotions that are on a gradient scale. If you're familiar with David Hawking's work, he was a neuroscientist and a psychiatrist and a medical doctor, amazing. And he was able to sort of put our emotions and our feelings on this gradient scale. Our emotions do have a vibration. They emit a vibration. And that vibration will magnetize situations, people, things to us that have a similar vibration. So if you have if you went through your spouse having an affair and it left this emotion of betrayal in you and it's not processed, then you are exuding a vibration of betrayal in your energetic field. And then you can start to be attracted to situations that play out betrayal in your life, or you could magnetize situations to you that play betrayal out in your life. That is why people who are always sad will find things to be sad about, why people who are always angry will find things to be angry about, or why you may see these repeating patterns that take place in your personal relationships. So it's very important that these emotions are processed. There doesn't mean that these feelings are bad, though. It just means that they exist on this gradient scale. So at the most high level of vibration is gratitude, is joy, is happiness. And ideally, we all want to be vibrating at that high level, because that's when you start to magnetize better and better situations into your life, and where you can align with, a certain element of consciousness that's more supportive to who you are and what you want to try to create. It also indicates a high degree of inner alignment and processing and work that you've done. So that is what we would all ideally like to be at, but you can't get there by denying the vibrational emotions that are on the lower part of the gradient scale. So this practice of just sitting and being with the emotions, allowing yourself to feel them, is a way of finding completion with the feeling or the emotion. And when you don't do this kind of work, so when you suppress or deny or avoid the feeling, it doesn't go away, right? It finds a way to manifest because you have to do the work. At the end of the day, all of us want to be whole. We all want to be healed. We all want love. We all want to feel good. That is the end goal. But when you're not conscious of it, when you're not conscious of these unconscious feelings, they will find ways to manifest. In the end, it's really to try to find healing. We're actually all just looking for healing. But if you're not conscious of it, you can do it in a way that is actually more re-traumatizing. So back to the example of the woman or man whose spouse has an affair and they have feelings of betrayal that they haven't processed yet. And so those feelings of betrayal act as points of attraction towards situations that have a similar vibration. So that person may find themselves in situations where they're playing out these different scenarios of betrayal in their life, not because they're trying to do something bad for themselves, but actually because they're trying to find healing. The healing occurs when you complete the cycle, and you come through to find the lesson, and you come through to find the wisdom, and you come through to feel good and feel in a space of joy that's not a place of being victimized or a place of, blame or shame, essentially. So just to recap, this November theme, I'm going to be talking a lot about burnout, the signs and symptoms, and healing approaches of burnout. Burnout is a physical, emotional, and mental state that happens to a person when they've been underneath chronic stress for a long period of time. It's so powerful that it can foster disease in the body. And the very, 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 very first indicator of burnout is emotional exhaustion. And so that's why today I spoke so much to you about emotional health and how to handle less unpleasant emotions. So I'm just going to see if anyone has any questions. Just leave a little minute to see if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask or anything that they'd like to share. And, somebody had earlier asked, Monica wanted to ask how to deal with grief in terms of Ayurveda. This would be, one way, is to really allow yourself to feel the grief, to process the grief. I think, in situations like that, ritual can be really, really powerful to help you to process the emotion too. And I don't know, where the grief is coming from, where the sense of loss is coming from, but, you could do something to help facilitate the release. And, that could be, really something very simple. Well, the new moon is coming up on November 4th, and that's a great time to do some inner work and some ritual work of healing. The new moon is the time of the month to look within and to feel and process our feelings. So it's really supportive. You could, on the night of the new moon, pour like a bowl of water, and, sit in a dark space in your room. Just really allow yourself to feel the grief. I like to affirm when you're feeling emotions like that, just to yourself. You could say, even though, I feel this grief, I love and appreciate myself anyway. I think that's a really powerful affirmation to say to yourself when you're feeling some of these emotions, because, as I had said earlier, a lot of the emotions and the feelings that we feel are labeled as bad feeling. I felt bad. I felt that was a bad feeling. So immediately when we say something is bad, there's immediately going to be a shame, associated with having that feeling. So if you're feeling grief, or if you're feeling hatred, or if you're feeling whatever, even though I feel this grief right now, I love and appreciate myself anyway. Even though I feel this grief right now, I love and appreciate myself anyway. Even though I feel this anger, I love and appreciate myself anyway. So give yourself permission to feel it. And then I don't know, what you're feeling grief around, but I associate that with some kind of a loss. And so, there'd be so many things you could do. I would say to just check in with your intuition about it. Sometimes, with clients, we'll do a lot with roses. So you could take a rose and breathe into the rose for 5 minutes. And if there's anything that you want to let go of, pluck a petal of the rose and just speak it into the rose petal, what you want to let go of, and drop it into the bowl of water. And then take the bowl of water and then, pour it on the ground, after you're done. So that would just be, a simple ritual that you could do to help with honoring the feeling that you're feeling, not rejecting it, but then also doing something, to externally honor that emotion and that feeling and give it to give it permission to feel it, so that you can come to new meaning around that feeling, that emotion that is more empowering to you, in a way that's truly organic and authentic, not as a way to suppress that feeling or to avoid it, because you do need to process it. So I hope that was helpful. Okay, how to move through anxiety of not feeling grounded when driving, running errands, after having many episodes of panic, feeling abandoned, prone to having an anxiety attack. Okay, so this is like your stress response. So we have, we have stressors in our lives, right? So that could be, that they could be external or they could be internal. Traffic jam is an external stressor. Being late, external stressor, so those are external stressors. And then you could have an internal stressor, like a fear of something, like a fear of flying, or, being afraid to speak publicly. So you have external stressor and you have internal stressors. Then you have your stress response. So your stress response is a physiological process, right? Your heart starts to beat faster. Thoughts start to race. And so the more that a person has a stress response to a stress trigger, the more that happens, the easier it is for it to happen. So it's a neurological cascade, in the brain, in the body that occurs. And it feels like it's not of your control at all. And when it's happening, it's in many ways, it's very difficult to interrupt. But what you need, what you would be working with would be your stress response. So it's not necessarily like you're going to have to probably run errands the rest of your life, that day is always going to be there. But what you can start to interrupt is your stress response. So I think the first place to begin with that is to understand that it's just the way that your body and your mind are reacting. And it's because that's how you've reacted like 100 times. It's a neurological response in your body, but it doesn't mean it's who you are, as a soul, as in the deep core of yourself, So I think first, like disconnect a little bit and understand that this is just a physiological reaction of my body, but it's not who I am. Again, back to that affirmation. Even though I feel anxiety and panic when I have to run these errands, I love and appreciate myself anyway, to allow yourself to give yourself that feeling. But then you need to start doing things that are going to help with shifting the stress response of your body. And a lot of that would happen outside of when you're actually responding that way, So cultivating, a meditation practice would be good. I think, taking some time early in the morning to envision how you want your day to go. So like, every time you say, like you just said to me, and maybe you say this, I don't know how many times a day you say it maybe in your life. Every time I run errands, I have an anxiety attack and I have a panic attack, right? So the words that we use to describe our experience and our reactions, you've just now told your whole system, every time I go and run errands, I have an anxiety attack, which leads to a panic attack. There's some, when we do things like that, when we try to shift the words and the way that we're describing our experience, you want it to feel authentic. You don't want to feel like you're lying about it. But you need to give just a little bit of wiggle room for a different potential to occur, so, and to make that step in a way that feels real to you. So maybe it's like, every time, I drive, I say, I give a little prayer of intention that I'm going to feel really, really calm on my drive that day, So it's just giving different wordage to what that potential experience could be. So it's just really powerful to do that. So you're not constantly affirming that this terrible thing is going to happen when you drive. So I think that needs to be shifted as well. And I understand that you needed to ask the question. But like I said, I don't know how you're describing that every day to other people in your life. So looking at your wordage and how you're describing your experience is really important too. And then I think doing some forms of resilience training. So there are ways that you can cultivate resilience. Also, physical movement and exercise, making sure that you have good community in your life. All the Ayurvedic lifestyle practices, the Abhyanga, the self-massage with oils, pranayama, so yogic breathing practices are really, really powerful for people that have anxiety and tendencies towards panic. And you may need to do a long pranayama practice, so I have this on my YouTube channel, but I really like, I do this a lot with people just as a foundational training, and I still do this practice myself. But you can lay on your back and then take, a brick or a weight and put it on your low belly, and then inhale the breath in through your nose and exhale the breath out your mouth for about 15 minutes. So you're just inhaling the breath in through the nose, feel the brick raise, and then exhale the breath out the mouth and let the breath come out of your mouth. So you're doing this in tandem with the rise and fall of the brick. this or the weight, or you could put a book. I use a 2.5 pound circular weight and put it on my low stomach, and that's what I give to my clients. And this is a practice that actually comes from Chinese medicine that helps to build, qi and energy in the hara. And it's really good for confidence and for positivity and just for strengthening your energy. So that's something I would do for at least 15 minutes a day. And self-abhyanga, medicated oils at least twice a week. Envisioning a different outcome. So taking that time in your morning to envision, okay, I'm going to drive in my car and I'm going to feel good. I'm going to listen to some music and, just visioning a different outcome. And then also, speaking about that experience differently to people in your life. So don't affirm that you're going to have an anxiety or panic attack. Affirm something else, but you need to make sure it's realistic, doesn't feel like a lie. So, what is the first step that would feel really real to you? Those would be some of the practices that I would suggest. There's probably a lot more, but I think that's something that'd be good to get you started. So somebody said, feeling like you're out of energy, gas. So feeling like you're out of energy. So that's always an interesting one, being out of energy. When people come to me and they say that they're tired all the time. I mean, there can be many reasons why a person would feel tired all the time. But if we're keeping it within the context of, anything just from, they could be anemic, they could be, so many different things. But if we're going to keep it into the context that we're talking about right now, which is around the emotions, if your mind and your attention is always on something, suppressing something, holding something down, or some kind of stressful event, there's energy always going towards that. That can be very depleting. That will cause fatigue. And actually, there's a ton of research that's come out specifically with chronic fatigue patients, people that have chronic fatigue and also fibromyalgia, that they tend to be very, very big emotional suppressors. So when you're always suppressing, there's always some muscle energy going to holding something down. Eventually, it's going to start to make you feel tired. So I think it goes back to, taking the time to do emotional processing, so that it doesn't build up and it doesn't catch up to you. All right. Well, thank you so much. This was really nice. I'm going to be doing this every Wednesday morning at 9:00, and I'll be putting a little post that you can send questions to me. You can email me, or you could just direct message me the questions and I'll answer them on the call. Or if you want to join at 9:00 Eastern time on Wednesdays, and you can post your questions below, I'm happy to answer them. And I hope that this information was supportive to you in your path and that you found it useful. And thank you so much, and have a good Wednesday.